Welcome, Andrew, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. As mentioned, I'm coming from a slightly different perspective as a designer, a commercial artist. So I'm very rarely creating my own work as a self-expression. I'm usually doing it as a commission, but hopefully some of what I share here will be useful to everyone as well. So first, I want to take you on a little bit of a time trip back to August of 2001. Four art school graduates with zero business sense had the brilliant idea of starting a design studio on their own, like you do. And they wanted to do the kind of work that they wanted to do, masters of their own fate, that sort of thing. And then a month later, this happens. So, in addition to having no business experience, no clients, we are also mostly international students in a country that for some reason is dramatically developing a distaste for un-Americans or non-Americans. So, no challenge, no pressure. But nevertheless, despite all the reasons why it should have failed, Paragon, the company that we founded, is still here. And in the process, we've gotten the chance to work on some cool projects with a few recognizable clients. But you don't get these kinds of opportunities over 23 long years of business without learning some hard lessons. And so that's what I wanted to share with you guys for the next couple of minutes. Three of the more important yet less intuitive lessons that we've learned in our old age as we shuffle off, hopefully sparing you the heartache of having to learn these lessons the hard way, like we did. So the first mistake we made when we started out was we were trying to do too many things for too many people. And so we were so excited to start using these skills that we've just learned in school that we didn't really spend the time to find a target to focus that energy, meaning we didn't find a niche, which is a specific segment of the industry or any industry or a target demographic that we want to focus our services on. And so this is tempting for any new creative business because you're more concerned with getting work, getting paid, getting that money than anything else. So you think that the more opportunities you go after, the more chances you'll get to make said money, which makes sense. This is what we thought. But in our experience, this approach ended up wasting a lot of time and burning us out because when you don't pick a niche, you end up spreading yourself too thin across many industries and you don't spend enough time developing expertise in any one area. Speaking of expertise, even if you provide one creative service, say for us, example, web design, or maybe even just logo design, clients are looking for people who are skilled in solving their specific problem. So a restaurant owner has a different set of challenges for their website or their logo than a law firm. And so you can't develop a portfolio that proves to them that you can solve, that you have those particular set of skills if you're busy trying to develop all the skills for every industry and every niche. So in the first decade that we were in business, our portfolio was just all over the place. It had a bunch of logos and package design and brochures and e-commerce websites and all sorts of stuff. But then whenever we went after a new project in a new industry, it was hard to convince the prospects that we had the skills to solve their particular problem. We know we could do it. But we just had no proof. And we were constantly losing bids to the specialists, people who wisely spent all of their time focusing on one specialty and developing expertise there. Which brings me to one of the most important marketing lessons that we learned the hard way, that you need to differentiate. There's so much competition out there, especially now that creative image making tools like Canva and now Midjourney and Dali and Kittle make image generation so easy. So it's more important than ever to find a corner of the market where you are the best option and ideally the only option. It's a principle we learned called the blue ocean strategy. So if the marketplace is likened to an ocean, then the red areas are where the sharks are already hunting and feeding. There's lots of competition. You're going to want to stay away from these areas because there's already lots of competitors churning the waters, doing what you want to do for much longer than you have. So what you want to look for are the blue areas. These are the areas where there's little to no competition yet, making it easier for you to stand out, especially when you're first starting. So I'm not going to lie to you. This is very difficult, especially nowadays. Finding these little patches of blue ocean is getting increasingly difficult, but it's not impossible. So I want to use this bottled water category as an example. Almost all of the products in this space package themselves in clear plastic bottles, touting their freshness and lying about the waterfall in Fiji that they get their water from. And that's because they're all going after the same niche, which is classic red ocean. Then along comes liquid death to say, okay, we're going to go in a different direction. Since everyone is going after the health enthusiast that's just finished the third marathon of the day, we're going to go after the person who's in a bar who doesn't want to drink alcohol, but doesn't want to look weird or out of place around their friends who do, which is a very, very narrow niche. It's very risky, but they just recently got valued at over $1 billion. So it seems to be working out for them. Now, there's no rule against having multiple specialties if you're indecisive, like I am. So, Paragon, for example, we have boiled ourselves down to 4 specialties that we're focusing on. But remember, each new specialty or each different specialty requires time, effort to be able to demonstrate the relevant expertise. So, generating content and a portfolio that shows that you know what you're doing takes us 4 times as much work as if we just picked one niche. But we're just gluttons for punishment. So, but you don't have to be. So learn from our mistakes. Don't spread yourself too thin. Or at least if you are just as ADD and multi-hyphenate as we are, then just know what you're getting into if you're foolish enough to follow us. So the next big lesson that we had to learn is fairly common for creative types, and which is we overvalue the role that talent is going to play in our success. In other words, we underestimate how much of our time is going to need to go towards the quote unquote unsexy, boring business stuff. Now, we love doing creative stuff. Most of you probably love doing creative stuff. And so we foolishly thought that if you start a creative business, that means you're going to get paid to do creative stuff all day. And the way that we succeed in this business is to produce better looking or better functioning creative stuff than our competitors, but we weren't aware of the amount of non-creative stuff that needs to go on before you even get to the creative part. In fact, most of our time is spent doing this very necessary but not quite artistic stuff. And I would say that whatever degree of success that we've enjoyed so far has come not from producing award-winning, masterful work, but actually mastering the unsexy, boring business stuff. Now, there's a bright side to this because if you're like me and you like to compare yourself to other designers and artists, then it can be depressing to look at everybody else's work and seem like you're not as talented as they are. But it's nice to know that just because they're turning out better work than you, or it might seem like they're turning out better work than you, that doesn't mean you don't have a chance. It doesn't mean that you can't compete with them. In fact, one of the biggest projects that we won early on in our business, in our career, was for the Weather Channel. And we were competing against big shot firms in New York and Atlanta, people we had no right being in the same room with, let alone competing against on a project. Yet, in spite of that, we still won the project. So miracles do happen. But it can be frustrating if you're not prepared for the amount of this quote unquote boring work needs to take place. And so you might think that it's getting in the way of doing the creative work, when if you're doing it right, it can be facilitating the creative work. So thankfully, in my last year of grad school, my college offered an elective called Entrepreneurship for Creatives. And the professor introduced us to some of the stuff that they teach normal people in business school. And, the standard stuff like invoices and keeping track of receipts and putting aside a percentage for taxes and factoring in profit margins in your hourly rate, all of that good stuff. But there were 2 concepts in particular that ended up surprising me the most, not just because of the inclusion, but also how important they ended up being in our business. The first one is cultivating relationships, also known as networking, which used to be a dirty word for us, partially because most of us are introverts and networking involves talking to strangers, but also because networking back in the day, I don't know if it still does, felt very sleazy, felt very salesy and slimy and like you're a used car salesman or insurance salesman or something like that. No offense to any used car salesmen in the audience. It felt too much like we were just pushing ourselves unabashedly, and we avoided it for a long time. But eventually, we started to realize that the deciding factor for who got the project wasn't necessarily just the talent or the portfolio is who you know, or simply being in the right place at the right time. So I would recommend just being prepared to be physically and digitally present in a lot of spaces that you're not comfortable in, especially non-creative spaces, because that's where you're going to find the people who need your services. Thankfully, we learned this very simple trick to make networking less sleazy, and it's called just being helpful. So once you've gotten an introduction or you got your foot in the door with a prospect, just be intentional about offering up some value. It could be some advice, it could be a connection, an article you found, anything that you think could make their job easier or help them do their jobs better. One of the reasons why networking seemed to be sleazy for us was that the traditional approach used to be, what can I get from you? As soon as I look at your business card, how useful are you going to be to me? Instead of, let me see how I can be helpful to you. And that made it all the better. So this is actually how we got into one of the niches that we are in right now. So I mentioned the Weather Channel. While we were working on the projects for them, we would just be helpful. We would offer up tips and tutorials to all the other designers working on the same project, tools that we thought would help them do their job better. And we even actually invited one of their designers to come to our studio so that we could give her some hands-on help. And lo and behold, when she left and went for a new company, she remembered how helpful we were. So she called us up and said, hey, I'm working at this new company. Can you help me with this new project? I'm like, hey, sure, we will help you. And word got around in the new company. And soon we were working with a bunch of other agents in that new company. Lo and behold, a massive layoff happens. And now all of these agents are working at other companies. What happens? All of them remember how helpful we were. So now the super spreading event happens. The Paragon virus is now spread to 6 or 7 different agencies in this niche, all starting from a single act of being helpful with one client. Now, the other aspect, it ties to another vital but not art-related skill that I think every creative should develop. And that's being able to truly understand what your clients want. Now, I'm convinced that every commercial art degree program, nobody agrees with me, but I'm still going to tout it, should include at least one class on psychology, client psychology, because it's surprising how much of our time is spent being our clients' design therapists, so to speak. And a large part of how we keep our clients happy and keep them coming back comes down to how we're able to listen to what they're asking, manage their expectations, understand their fears, solve their problems, and even anticipate future issues for them without them having to ask us. So now we're at the point where all of our clients are long-term clients. All of our clients have come to us through word of mouth, and they can just call us up and pick our brains, even if it's not project related. And a lot of the times they have displayed all of the emotions that you see on the screen right now. And they've called us to say they realize that we know how to ask the right questions. We know how to translate their rambling thoughts into intelligible sentences. And so what we've done is now establish ourselves as indispensable rather than just a vendor that they call, rather than just a creative mind that they call when they have a specific project. All right. So what that does, though, it requires a bit of curiosity, intellectual curiosity. So this is another bit of advice I would say is stay curious about a lot of things. We're constantly researching topics that have nothing to do with art, nothing to do with design, but it's knowledge that we think will come in handy for our clients. Again, this is another advantage of having one niche because then now you're not spreading all your time researching 6, 7, 8 niches to find out information to become an expert in their particular discipline. So this treatment, just being helpful, puts us in a privileged position that even when we make costly mistakes, like the one you're seeing on the screen, we accidentally left a huge typo right on the cover of their annual report. Now, again, because of the goodwill we had with the client and because of how we treated this mistake and recovered from the mistake, we still managed to not only keep them happy, but they're our longest running client right now. And they were happier with the fixed version of the project than they were with the original version. And they entered in a bunch of competitions and all that. But that's not the point. The point is they were happy and they're still with us. So I realized that these are all quote unquote soft skills that don't necessarily tie directly to billable hours. They don't tie directly to creating an impressive portfolio and pieces that you want to show off. But so it's easy to underestimate the value of this stuff to your business. But coming from our experience, this is just as important to the longevity of your business as all of the finance and accounting stuff, as all of the creative stuff. Plus, when creative output becomes a commodity, which it seems like it's very fastly coming to that point, these softer human skills, like cultivating relationships, problem solving on behalf of your clients, these are the things that are going to set you apart, not just from your competitors, but your competitors and their robot overlords. All right, last lesson that I wish we had started implementing as soon as we started our business, because it takes some time to set up, but it ends up saving so much time and it makes you a more efficient designer artist in the process. It involves documenting everything that you do in your business and everything that you do to make it run, and then figuring out how to turn that into a repeatable process or system. So take, for example, something as simple as how do you respond to a project inquiry? At the start, we didn't have a system. So each new phone call, each new opportunity meant that there was this long initial phone call gathering all of this project information and some irrelevant information, and then taking us a couple of days to figure out from scratch, how do we quote it? How do we scope the work? How do we put together an estimate? And that's precious time that we're wasting doing this instead of, doing the stuff that makes us money. So now we have a system of forms and checklists. Some of them are even automated and templates to walk a prospect through the sales process. Each stage is quick and easy and painless since we're only finding out what we need to figure out if we're a good fit and then get them to an accurate estimate. And so now what used to take days is just taking like an hour, if that long. Now, even your creative work, I would recommend, should have some sort of system in place to help you work more efficiently. Obviously, you don't want to make the process too restrictive because this is creative work. You want to have some room for spontaneity and flexibility. But having at least a broad roadmap of milestones to give you some structure to work within, I think would be very useful. So this helps not just our own internal process, but it helps when you're working with a client as well, because then they know what to expect and then they feel like you know what you're doing. So think of it like you're a tour guide and these are all people visiting a strange land for the first time. Better yet, you can involve them in the creation process. And once they're involved, they feel some ownership of the outcome, making it more likely that they're going to like and they love the output. So that's why at the start of every project that we begin, we walk the client through a project roadmap, kind of like I said, the tour guides in a strange land. The roadmap shows them every step of the process that we're about to go into, where their feedback is going to be needed, how long we expect it to take. And, there's always going to be a level of uncertainty with creative projects. So there's flexibility baked into the process and we make adjustments along the way. But having this plan and showing them, the client, this plan, the roadmap removes as much of the uncertainty and risk and friction as possible. So they feel comfortable taking this journey with you. All right. So to wrap it up, in conclusion, if I could steal the time stone and just go visit my younger self back in 2001, I would give him this advice: buy Apple stock, because then you'd be rich by now and you won't need my advice. But knowing me, I wouldn't listen. So then I would say, fine, find a niche and commit to building up expertise in that area. It'll help you differentiate your services, save time trying to not to compete in red oceans. Then I'd prepare my younger self for the amount of boring stuff that he will have to be doing, and that it's not actually that boring once you get the hang of it. It's not artistic, but it's just as important. So embrace it, love it, make it your friend. And then I'd recommend documenting everything that you do in your business, turning them into repeatable processes as soon as possible. All right, so that was a quick overview. Obviously, I didn't cover everything, so I'm curious to hear what questions you might have.